Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. It is not a painting tutorial, but I was going through my studio and just kind of organizing things the other day, and I found my very first ever floral watercolor piece. I painted this in 2018 with a $5 set of Crayola watercolor paints, and I just used the little plastic brush that it came with, and this isn't watercolor paper, it's just mixed media art journal paper. So I just remember being so happy painting this and feeling so excited and inspired, and I think this is really the piece that made me fall in love with watercolors and specifically watercolor florals. I just thought it could be fun to recreate it in my current style and using my current nicer watercolor supplies. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. So first things first, I need to try to color match. I'm gonna do the best I can. I obviously don't have the exact colors, and also the part of my style that I would change about this is making slight color adjustments. For example, I wouldn't use this bright neon green anymore, so I'm gonna tone that down a bit. But to match these first roses, I'm going to use permanent red light and quinacridone red. And then the next I'm going to match this yellow, so I'll just use a bit of primary yellow. And then I think the closest I'll get to this orange is using my Odyssey palette from Art Philosophy. Obviously this is a very bold shade of it, so again I'm just going to have to make that significantly lighter. Now for the blue I'm going to use a mix of Prussian blue and Payne's gray. It's a very interesting shade. And then for the green, like I said, I wouldn't choose to use this neon green necessarily, but the closest I have to that is Hooker's green, but I'm going to tone it down with a deep sap green. And then there are also these little black dots. I'm not sure why they're there, but for that I'm just going to use a very light value of carbon black. So I think this is a pretty close match. Obviously the green is significantly different, but I just can't get myself to paint with that bright of a green. So let's get started with the roses. I always, when I paint compositions, I go largest elements and then work my way smaller. So I'll start by adding these 3 roses. And if you also want to paint along with me, I would love that. I remember when I very first started painting, right around the time when I painted this piece, I was just so infatuated with loose florals, and one of my favorite artists to follow at that time was Jolly Poa. I still follow her. I'm still so inspired by her. She's amazing, very talented. And so yeah, I never really even tried painting other stuff with watercolor when I first started. It was just diving headfirst into loose florals, and as you can probably tell, I haven't really stopped. So I have always been drawn to florals. And roses were definitely the very first types of flowers that I really put effort into learning, and I've painted them still in so many different styles since then, because there are so many different beautiful ways to paint roses. I absolutely love them, and they're versatile. You can add them into so many different floral compositions. And it's kind of funny when I look back at these old paintings, they almost have like a sticky glaze to them because they were these very, very student grade. Actually, I wouldn't even call them student grade. I would say they're more so like kindergarten level paints. And I don't even remember honestly why I bought them or what prompted me to get them that day, but I just wanted to give it a try, and I had also been doing some calligraphy prior to that, so it's kind of related. But I think I was just looking for another creative outlet. And this is just one that I decided to give a try. So I'm going to leave this rose as is, and I'm already starting to paint much bigger. I don't really paint roses this small anymore, so it might be tricky for me to fit all of them. I'll just have to try to do the next 2 a little bit smaller, so it's slightly above this first rose, but it's going to be budding up right next to it. So I'm going to do my best to keep this one smaller. We'll see how it goes. And I'm also going to try to make the tone a little bit more reddish than pinkish. That first rose was definitely more on the pink side, so adding a bit more of that red. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've ever done anything like this, if you found old paintings of yours that you've tried to recreate and compare how they look. And also, while I paint this, I'm in no way trying to say like, oh, I can't believe I painted this, it's so embarrassing or cringy. I definitely don't think it's cringy at all. I still am very proud of this painting. Obviously, it's not a masterpiece in any way, but I just remember feeling so much joy and excitement after painting it. And that was really what kicked off my love for watercolors. So I'll keep this painting forever. So I'm not at all trying to say, oh, look how much better this new painting is. Yes, it's a different style. Yes, I have more experience under my belt, but I'm still very proud of this first one, even though it's not so much my style anymore. Okay, yes, I'm definitely painting much bigger this time. This is going to be a little bit difficult, but shameless plug, if you do want to learn how to paint roses, I have several tutorials here on YouTube. I will link my favorite one here up at the top. And even today, I find myself painting roses in different ways all the time. I don't have one specific method that I use every single time. I'm constantly experimenting with new techniques and trying out a bunch of new styles all the time. I do remember when I first learned this technique, it was always put your little curvy marks up at the top and then heavy ones down at the bottom. So all my roses at that time looked like this, which is kind of funny. That was the very first beginner rose technique that I ever learned somewhere on YouTube. I wish I could find which tutorial I was following for this piece that I did. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it, so I can't credit the artist, but even though I don't paint roses like this anymore, I so clearly remember thinking it was so easy and I love the way the roses turned out. And again, it was really the feeling of painting that I really loved so much, more so than the outcome. And then, of course, COVID hit and there was unlimited time to paint at home. So I feel like that was really when I experienced the most growth with my artwork and also my Instagram account. A lot of people were posting their artwork on Instagram, and that's where I met a lot of other artists during that time that I'm still friends with today. I love everyone I've been able to meet through social media. All right, so first 3 roses are done. My composition is going to be way too big, unfortunately, but that's okay. We'll keep going. Next up, I'm going to paint these little orange flowers. I don't know. I never would probably paint orange and blue flowers together these days, but that's what this piece is. So I'm going to start with the orange petals. And I'll just put down some dots and then pull out the petals. And yeah, there's also such a significant difference in the materials that you paint with. So like I said, the Crayola watercolors that I painted with, they had absolutely no vibrancy. The pigments were not rich at all. And so everything looks a little bit muted and washed out. The brush I was using was the plastic blue brush that came with the set of watercolor paints. It doesn't have a pointed tip at all. It's kind of just frayed bristles. So that makes it very difficult. And then obviously this was also mixed media paper. So it's better than just regular printer paper, but it's not the best for watercolors. So I'm going to paint all these orange flowers first, and then I'll go ahead and tap in the dark blue. But yeah, just looking back on it, I was so excited about it, and I didn't go all out with fancy materials or anything, but I do remember driving straight to Michael's after painting this piece, which was in the next town over at that time, and I got some student grade Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors, and I got some art philosophy palettes and just spent hours and hours and hours. After my marketing job, I would just come home and start painting. I loved it so much, and even at work, all I could think about was painting and what tutorials I was going to try next. And it's kind of fun to think back on that time because I just had so much fun. It's a good reminder too, because especially when you turn your hobby into a business like I have, sometimes a little bit of that joy can be lost because it's now what you do for work every day. So when I think back to these times, it's just a good reminder to remember how much pure fun I had painting at that time and learning. And my paintings weren't very good, but I had a lot of fun, and that's all I really cared about. And also posting on Instagram was a lot different that time, way different. I probably sound like an old lady saying, back in my day, this is how Instagram was, but it was so much different. There weren't any reels. It wasn't all about engagement. I just really wanted to post and share my artwork and meet other beginners, and it was a fun time. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble a little too much, so let's go ahead and just tap in some of this blue in the middle. Again, this is kind of cheating because I would not want that big of a blue bleed these days. But I do want to also see how my actual style is a bit different, so I'm just going to barely add a tiny bit of the blue in the middle. Now I'm going to fill in some of these center yellow filler flowers. And in this piece, basically I just put polka dots down on the page, so my process now would be a bit different. I'd probably start with some super light value. I will still stick with the dots, but just give them a little bit more of a shape and also make them a little more loose style. So I'll start with really light value, very watery, and then I'll go in with the darker value of this yellow, and you can see it bleeding out and creating more of an interesting look. And I'm also going to give a little more shape to it. I do actually like the composition here. Again, I can't take credit for it. It was following a tutorial, but it does have good movement. So let's do some of the lighter green leaves next. I have a pretty light value of my green mixture, and I'm just going to start adding the very first layer of these. And then I will go back with a darker shade of this green to do some of these little stems and additional greenery. But yeah, I would also love to know in the comments, are you a hobby artist? Did you start painting during the pandemic? I know a lot of the artists I've met on Instagram, we all kind of started really investing into practicing more and learning more during the pandemic when it was stay at home and there was not a whole lot of stuff to do. But yeah, what I'm also going to do is add a little bit of greenery in between those yellow filler flowers, because that's definitely something I would do differently. This first piece just has a kind of floating dots. So I just want to use the tip of my brush to add a little bit of greenery that would be connecting all of these. And not necessarily painting a perfect stem or anything like that, but just kind of showing where these elements are all connecting. They're not just floating. So they have a bit of a stem running through them, but I don't want to go overboard. Okay, so next up I'm going to do these little red things, and I actually don't know if they're supposed to be berries or filler flowers, but since we have these yellow fillers, I'm gonna go ahead and make these guys berries. So I'll just add a few little dots of where those will be, and then I'll soften it out a bit. So one of the differences here is these are all just kind of flat looking. They're all the same value. So now if I do berries, I have a little bit of a change in value. So you can see some depth with the shadows and having a nice gradient from light to dark. And I could probably move to a smaller brush here, but I kind of want to challenge myself to use this one brush, because I know for a fact I only used one brush on that painting on the left. It was just the blue plastic one that came with the Crayola set. So I added a few more berries here in lighter value, but while it's still wet, again, I have this stem coming out on the left, so I'm gonna add a little bit of that here. And since everything is wet, you get some gentle bleeds which you know how much I love those. With these materials on the left, there's no way I would have been able to get those bleeds because there's not cotton paper, and it's definitely not the type of paint that can really bleed and bloom. And I'm already running out of room. I knew that was gonna happen. I have a hard time painting small like this. Not that it's that small, but I like to usually fill up the page, so that's okay. So now same thing. I'm gonna add a bit of a stem here. Again, what I did here is just drop some dots down, which I would probably not do nowadays. I want to show that it's at least connected and part of the overall composition. So I'm gonna add a few more. I know this one's up a little bit further, but I don't have much room to work with. So just gonna add a few more down here. And again, I paint berries just by starting with a dark value like that. It's kind of U-shaped, and then just using a clean brush to blend it out a bit, which does take a few rounds of lifting up color and adding a bit more, but I like how it looks. Okay, so the last couple things will be to add a second layer of leaves and to add these little stems. I'm not sure what this style of leaf is down at the bottom, but that's definitely not how I do them. And then again, not quite sure what these little black dots are doing, but I will go ahead and add those at the end. So I am going to do a slightly darker value of green here. Again, it's deep sap green and hooker's green, but first I'm just going to add some overlapping leaves, and then I'll go ahead and use a much darker green for those stems that are shooting out of the flowers. So just going to add a few leaves here. You can see it's a slightly darker value. And I actually remember when I got my very first actual decent quality brush after using the Crayola one, and it was such a big difference. I was like, wow, I can actually paint leaves now just by pressing down and lifting back up. Because when I painted leaves with the Crayola brush, like I did here, I basically had to kind of draw it out and then paint it in. So yeah, it was a lot more difficult. So I remember getting that first brush and being like, this is so much easier. I wish I had it from the beginning. And that is not to say that you need fancy supplies to be able to paint. That is definitely not the case. I painted the one on the left and had a lot of fun with very basic supplies. But yeah, I do remember that difference once I tried with a brush that I really liked, and that was a little higher quality. And now, of course, that I get to use Princeton brushes, you know how much I love the Princeton brushes. It's a whole new ball game. But yeah. You definitely don't have to have fancy supplies to have a lot of fun painting and to improve your skills. It definitely helps, but it is not mandatory. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry a little bit and just add these little black dots. Again, I'm not quite sure what they are for. I'm sure the tutorial instructor had a reason for them, but I don't quite remember. But I will add these anyways. So I have my carbon black, and we'll just add these little random dots to the piece. Now for the last step, I'm going to get a pretty dark value of green. This is definitely a bold, vibrant green. Again, it's such a weird, sticky texture. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna add those 4 stems. This one at the top, I really didn't leave myself enough room, unfortunately, so I will make this one quite a bit smaller. But yeah, also I remember at this time I was so obsessed with painting leaves. I would fill, even in this same sketchbook, there are pages and pages of just leaf practice. I loved it so much. I also want to get back to that level of appreciation. I was so appreciative when I got that first new paintbrush. I think I got it from one of my older brothers for Christmas. And yeah, I just remember being so appreciative of that. I still very much appreciate my art supplies, but it's just a little different when you're using them every day. It's easy to start taking them for granted. So I think I'm going to have one coming down here because all the leaves I've painted so far are pointing upwards. I still don't really know what to do with those 2 black dots, but I'll try to work around it. And I'm going to add a stem curving downwards, adding some leaves on top, and just filling in this composition a little bit more. And then the final one, there are a couple of darker leaves down here, and then this stem coming off. Again, I did not leave myself enough room, so let's see. I'm going to just add a few more to balance things out a little bit before adding in these final leaf stems. Okay, so I think I'm done. It does look quite a bit different. I actually like this composition better because I left myself room to add that nice curve and movement. I made this one quite a bit bigger and kind of ran out of room to have those nice long leaf stems, but I do like the style of this one a little better. It's definitely more me. The bleeds are more controlled. And I do like the addition of the berries as well. So yeah, this was fun. I might try to do some more with some of my older paintings as well. So that's going to be it for this video, but I do really encourage you to try to hang on to some of your older artwork, or if you're a beginner, hang on to some of the artwork that you're currently making. It's so much fun to look back on, even though this was just 6 years ago. It's not like it was that long ago, but it is a nice way to be able to track your progress and see how your skills improve. And not even just skills, but see how your style evolves over time, and the subjects that you like to paint and the color palettes that you like to work with, and see how that all evolves as your style evolves. So it's also a nice way to just, sometimes when you're painting all the time, it's hard to feel like you're making progress because you're just in it. You're painting day by day, but when you actually compare something from a big chunk of time ago, you can clearly see how much you've improved and how much you've grown as an artist. So yeah, it's fun to look back on. I just kind of was flipping through this journal and found another cute little rose painting. So maybe I'll try to do another one of these, recreate an old painting type of videos again in the future. But I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun painting, and I will see you in the next video very soon.